Good morning, and thank you for coming here. I hope you can hear me. So, I will speak about North Africa. Yes, nowadays, even people living in remote areas are experiencing changes to their lives that are not only radical and far-reaching, but are also occurring at an ever faster pace. In these regions, as elsewhere, the need to adapt to new economic and living conditions, obligatory school attendance, satellite television, the internet, tourism, and ubiquitous availability of mostly imported industrial products shapes people's needs and desires, while also influencing their aspirations and values. Not only in the urban centers of North Africa, but also in the mountain villages and oases, ancient knowledge seems to be disappearing, and the interest of young people in their local traditions is fading away. Even in those places where the most important North African handicraft sectors, the knotting, weaving, and embroidering of textile fabrics, is still being passed on to the younger generations by grandmothers and mothers, the techniques and patterns and the meaning associated with them are undergoing change. The altered living conditions, the different sources of income, and new educational structures result in people producing fewer and fewer carpets, blankets, and clothing for their own use. Around the mid-20th century, the female-dominated domestic craft industry of Tunisia and Morocco saw an increasing trend towards market production. The state cooperatives that were established in many rural areas during that period succeeded in ensuring the preservation of local handicraft traditions, but owing to the regulation, standardization, and commercialization of their products under the auspices of the Office National de l'Artisanat, which introduced state-approved quality seals, they left little scope for vitality and authenticity in the textiles created. It is such authentic textiles that will be considered here. They are textiles steeped in tradition, suffused with historical references, fulfilling changed functions, and they are above all textiles possessing baraka, a force of blessing. Ultimately, all these factors mean that each of these individually made products is a component in a complex, religiously reflective worldview and global context. Upon closer observation, it is clear that continuity and change are always interconnected, and that those life strategies and life journeys are successful in which traditions do not congeal but develop in an innovative way. It is equally evident that radical breaks with history and traditions can lead to a sense of rootlessness and a feeling that the material world and earthly existence itself has lost its soul. Finally, we can also observe the fascinating process through which these textile creations become art, within the broader semantic framework of Western or European concept of art, and in a completely open cultural, historical, and geographical environment. Today, we are vaguely aware that the cultural diversity of the Maghreb is based on very old knowledge traditions which have continually incorporated innovative technical and material developments and intellectual ideas. We have knowledge about the oldest settlement layers dating back to the Garamantes, Numidians, and Libyans, who are regarded as the ancestors of the population group known today as Berbers or Imazirin in Morocco. Also important to mention are the Phoenician, Carthaginian, the Roman, and the Islamic eras. Over the past 1,300 years of the Islamic period alone, the Maghreb has been influenced by very diverse cultural features, which I can't explain now because of the time reasons. But the graphic symbols of an ancient Libyan script, which later developed into Tifinagh or Tifinagh, the alphabet of the Imazirin, survived into the modern era. Also the Jews brought their own religious symbolism with them. Traces were also left by Christian Byzantium, resulting in Greek and Coptic cultural elements. Contacts between the Western Africa and the region south of the Sahara date back to as far as the 5th century BC, intensified with the expansion of the Trans-Saharan trade around the start of the Common Era. And finally, mention should also be made of the European influence in the modern era, beginning with Portuguese and Spanish maritime trade starting in the 15th century on the coast of North Africa. All these cultural phenomena left their traces, especially in North African textiles, one of the most important mobile material artifacts testifying to urban and rural culture over the centuries. What makes North African textiles such a precious cultural asset is not only their functional diversity, like carpets, or flat woven fabrics as floor coverings, seating mats or sleeping rugs, partition walls, or even accommodation like nomad tents. Prayer rugs and coverings for holy sites, ritual textile associated with the circle of life, like birthing sheets, wedding wears, and death crowds, bags, horse equipments, and finally clothing. Their inestimable value lies in the stories that these textiles narrate through their motifs and patterns, which display an infinite range of composition and color variations, including pictograms and figures from many periods and all areas of life. The women of the Nafsawa oasis in southern Tunisia produce shawls and cloaks for various periods of life, which indicate the status of the wearer. As a young woman of marriageable age, as a bride during the wedding phase, as a mother, or as a revered elderly woman. Particularly colorful shawls with rich patterns incorporating individual ideas are used for the most important event in life, the wedding. The images symbolize change and transition, movement and rhythm, growth and balance. These emotions and conditions are reflected in often narrative design elements such as certain compositions, symmetry, and color. Realistic individual motifs and abstract versions of them in repeated geometric shapes have a high symbolic value as magical or ritual elements. They are bearers of baraka, the power of blessing. These include the fish, the snake, the scorpion, as well as a hand and the eye. Such symbols are meant to protect against the evil eye, that means envious looks and misfortune. They are a reminder of the constant presence of danger, chaos, and struggle in life. Good fortune, prosperity, and fertility, on the other hand, are associated with the fish, or the mostly 8-pointed star, and these powerful symbols are indispensable at weddings. The fish is associated with water, the essential elixir of life. Like the star, it stands for growth and harmony in life. Thus, these two motifs are among the protective symbols known from prehistoric or pre-Islamic times throughout the Mediterranean region. Although it is fervently wished for at every wedding, motherhood is rarely depicted in the way it is on the carpet fragment produced by the Hamna of the Morocco. You see it on the right side here. The rhythmic pattern of contraction during labor represented a series of lozenges, symbolized not only movement and change, but even creation of life itself. In the textile fabric, the weaver or knotter manifests her destiny and the structure of her life cycle. The fish again. The textile becomes a testimony to a specific worldview in the context of divine mystery. Religion good. Religiosity permeates all phases and aspects of life. The inexpressible is encoded in symbols. Through the repetition of motifs, an illusion is created and transcendence becomes tangible. It's not going on? Don't know what happens. The henna-painted shawls of the Fecha and the central anti-Atlas region of Morocco are used by the Ushofa, the descendants of saints, to concentrate baraka and achieve maximum protection. They are produced for the shrine of the Marabout bin Yaqub in Imin Tatelt, but are also sold from there. They seem to be painted quite intuitively with henna, the beneficial herb of paradise, and are worn by the bridal couple of every wedding. Motifs, such as the sandals of the prophet you saw before, the gate called Bab, moon and star constitute coded symbols which create a connection with the divine. Many of these symbols derive from pre-Islamic ideas and have a multicultural background, that which is ingrained in the collective consciousness as having proven useful and beneficial over long time periods is often continued in new social, political and religious contexts. For example, the Bab symbol can be traced to an ancient Libyan or Tifnanak glyph corresponding to the letter B. Orientation and quiet provide orientation, and contemplation and quiet provide orientation in life, which is also interpreted as spatial orientation. Edification, wellness, and cheerfulness are associated with the Garden of Eden, but also with earthly gardens. This include architecture, the dwelling house, the mosque, the kubba or shrine, which demarcate, if safe, the space. Design elements mostly incorporate symmetry or balance between composition and colors. Floral motifs, which are often derived from the 8-pointed star, originally based on the seal of Solomon, the flower garden with pools and watercourses. Here. The tree of life. The date palm, birds and gazelles stand for harmony between culture and nature. Beauty and aesthetic excellence for the pleasure of God and as an incentive to stimulate the highest level of human creativity are evident in the parade textiles influenced by the Middle East. These are mostly knotted carpets intended for display, which were used by wealthy families and were laid out as mosques. With their hybrid floral and geometric symbols, they emphasize and exalt fundamental aspects of life, such as birth and death, marriage, the relationship between nature and culture, and divinity. The designs feature frames and the careful structuring of patterns, as well as a balanced use of colors. Individual creativity, as the last one, seems almost to burst out of some of these textile works. They are made in Morocco and Tunisia for the producer's own use. Some of the wild compositions show their makers to have given free rein to their imagination, experimenting with possibilities, taking risks, and expressing their curiosity or simply joy in making them. Often several women would work together on one item as a social activity, shedding and choking, and apparently letting things take their course, curious to see what the final result would look like. Abstract archetypal symbols are nearly always present. They concentrate magical powers and are known throughout all the different regions of North Africa as signs of protection. The hand with its symbolic meaning of Khamsa, 5, the star, the eye, or amulet. The loss of meaning of certain signs and patterns is compensated for by local experiences of life and the environment. Thus, new symbols come into being, such as a colored embroidered motif on the South Tunisian melhafa, a wrap-around robe worn by women that can be identified as representing the footprints of desert animals in Sahara sand, or the Solomon seal motif star, which mutates into a jasmine blossom. The old Tifinagh script symbol for sea is turned into a dancer. Here is involved the sea to a dancer, or simply into a footprint of a dove on a woman's wrap-around robe worn by the feature in Morocco. The names given to many motifs can often be traced to animal, plants, or objects that are familiar and useful, such as camel, palm corn, scissor, comb, or tent. The individual creative and often highly abstract textile works of art can be interpreted as a reflection of practical everyday life and also of their makers' yearnings and desires. However, they can be read in many different ways and arouse different thoughts and dreams in every observer. A shimmering red surface on a Rihamna knotted carpet can be associated with a striving for light and the sun. It is as if one can feel the heat and observe a sunset. The blue and black color evoke the atmosphere of an impending thunderstorm with the promise of refreshing rain and pleasant coolness. All these wonderful textiles have practical functions, of course, but at the same time they are expression of art. Especially in modified techniques and material, recycled fabrics, which often have strong and flamboyant violet colors and compositions, they constitute innovations and reveal creative adaptation to changed conditions. As individual and expressive creations, they were discovered by textile lovers decades ago and have been collected as works of art. This has inspired many women, particularly in Morocco, to produce the same fabrics for sale and those intended for their own use. The value and charm of these textiles is not the rigid preservation of traditions, but rather the power of resilience and repositioning while consciously coming to terms with new influences under the rapidly changing conditions of everyday life. With unbridled creativity, the weavers, knotters, and dyers from the Maghreb continue today to create textile featuring highly formalized, abstract symbols that have a profound meaning, as they have long done in the past. It is an art consisting of symbols and colors, and they create works of art both as intuitive and as carefully thought out expressions of all dimensions of human spirit and all shades of human soul. The textile art produced by women in the Maghreb reflects something fundamental, the act of creation in life and in spirit, which manifests itself in constant motion and never-ending narrative. Thank you.